I'm 83. My son told me I was too ugly to attend his wedding, so I changed my will and left him nothing. I am Dorothy, and I have been putting off recording this for 2 weeks now, because every time I sit down to talk about it, I either get too angry or I start crying. And neither one of those is the energy I want to bring to this. But I need to get it out. I need somebody to hear this. So here we go. My son told me I was too ugly to come to his wedding. That is the sentence, and I have been turning it over in my head for 2 weeks, trying to find a different way to interpret it. But there is no other way to interpret it. He did not say it exactly like that, but that is exactly what he meant, and I think we all know it. He came over on a Tuesday afternoon. I had cookies out, because I always have something out when Thomas comes over. I have been doing that since he was 4 years old, and I am not about to stop now. He walked in, did not look at the cookies, did not look at the tea I had brewing, just sat on the edge of my couch like he already knew this was going to be a short visit. And he told me he did not think I should come to the wedding. I said, "What do you mean you do not think I should come?" He said it was a very curated event, modern aesthetic, and I had been sick, the scarf, the chemo, the coughing. He said it might make the guests uncomfortable. So I would make the guests uncomfortable at my own son's wedding. I am sitting here now trying to think of what I should have said, and I still cannot think of a single thing, because my brain just stopped working when those words came out of his mouth. And then his fiancée Amanda walked in right behind him, without knocking, just walked into my house like she had been there 100 times before. Started looking around my living room like she was appraising it for sale, and after a minute she looked at me and said, "Maybe after the honeymoon, we should start thinking about long-term care options for you. Somewhere peaceful, clean. Long-term care, in my own house, looking right at me." I said, "You mean a nursing home?" She smiled and said, "We just want what is best for you, Miss Dorothy." I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me in the comments. If someone came into your home and suggested you be put away while you were sitting right there in front of them, what would you have done? Because I genuinely want to know if I handled this wrong. I sat there in my lavender blouse, the one with the little pearl buttons Thomas used to play with as a baby, and I did not say a single word. I was waiting for him to say something, to correct her, to be my son. He did not say anything. Before they left, Thomas kissed the top of my scarf, right on the top of my head, the way you kiss someone who is already somewhere else in their mind, like he was practicing a goodbye he had already decided on. Then they were gone, and I was alone in my house with the warm tea and the untouched cookies and the sound of nothing. Let me back up, because you need to know who I am before the rest of this makes sense. My name is Dorothy. I am 83 years old, and I have lived in the same house in Memphis, Tennessee for 52 years. I raised Thomas in this house by myself after his father Harold walked out when the boy was 6. I worked hospital housekeeping for 28 years, night shifts, the kind of work that settles into your knees and your back and never fully leaves. I wore shoes until the soles came apart. I brought my lunch every single day. I said no to myself so many times for so long that no became my default. But here is the thing nobody knew. The whole time I was quietly building something. Not quietly like it was a secret exactly, more like quietly because nobody ever thought to ask. I bought my first rental property in my late 40s, a run-down duplex around the corner from where we lived. An elderly woman had passed, and her family just wanted it gone. And I had a small inheritance from my aunt, and I used every dollar of it to make a bid. I fixed that place up little by little, on weekends, after shifts when my feet were already killing me. I rented it out, and suddenly there was extra money coming in every month that had not been there before. So I bought another property, then a third. Then I put money into a beauty salon my church friend Joyce was trying to start. Because I had watched Joyce work herself half to death for years, and I believed in her. Nobody knew any of it. Not Thomas, not my neighbors, not a single person in my life. Because I never talked about money. I never talked about the properties. I never gave anyone a reason to think I was anything other than a woman who clipped coupons and worked night shifts. I still clipped coupons at the grocery store, still wore the same shoes, because the money was not for me, you understand? It was always going to be for him. That was the whole plan. When I was gone, Thomas would get everything, and there would be a letter explaining it all, telling him that the woman he thought had nothing had been quietly building a future for him across all those night shifts and all those years of saying no to herself. I had even written him birthday letters, one for every year until he turned 50, all of them sitting in a shoebox under my bed. I was going to surprise him. I had been planning that surprise for 30 years. And then a Tuesday afternoon happened, and the plan died. Now let me tell you the last thing Thomas said before he walked out, because this is the part I have been sitting with the most, and I need to say it out loud. He stood up from my couch and gave me the standard, "We love you, Mom," that he gives at the end of every difficult conversation. The one that sounds rehearsed, because it is. And then right at the door, he turned around and said it. "This is why Dad left you." Lord, he said it like he had been saving it for years, like he had been waiting for exactly the right moment to use it, and he finally found one. I need you to understand something about that statement. His father did not leave because of anything I did or anything I was. Harold left because he did not want to be a parent or a partner or anything that required him to show up consistently for another person. I worked 2 jobs while he found himself, and then he left anyway. But I never told Thomas that. I gave his father the gentler story, because I thought that was what a good mother did. You protect your child from the ugly version of things. You let him grow up believing his father was just broken, rather than that his father just did not want to stay. I protected Harold's image for 40 years, and Thomas used it to cut me. I sat there after the door closed, with my hands on my knees, just breathing, not crying, not screaming, just sitting in the quiet, trying to understand how we got here. That is still my son. That is still the boy I rocked to sleep and packed lunches for, and sat in bleachers in January for, and drove to college visits and called every Sunday. And he just stood in my doorway and threw his father at me like a weapon. Something shifted in me that night, and I want to be careful about how I describe it, because I do not want you to think I am talking about anger. It was not anger. It was something quieter and colder and more permanent than anger. The kind of internal shift that happens when you finally stop pretending about something you have known for a while. That night, I sat in my recliner and I did not move for a long time. I had on my old flannel robe, the one I have had since Thomas was in high school, and the streetlight outside was blinking, the way it has been blinking for 10 years that I keep meaning to call the city about and never do. Just sitting there, hands folded, hearing his voice. You will ruin the photos. You will make everyone uncomfortable. This is why Dad left you. I need to say something about that last one. People always say you cannot let other people's words live in you. You have to let it go, all that. But some things land different when they come from your child. When the person who says it is someone you pushed into the world with your own body, and stayed up with for nights on end, and sacrificed things for that you can never get back. That is when words land somewhere permanent. His father left because he was a coward, not because of me. Harold did not want the work of being a parent, and when things got hard, he chose himself, and he left. And I spent 40 years giving Thomas the softer version of that story, because I thought it was the kind thing to do. I told Thomas his father was broken, not that his father just did not want to stay. That was a mistake I made out of love, and Thomas used it as ammunition. I got up eventually and went to my bedroom, and got on my knees in front of the old filing cabinet at the bottom of my closet. Inside it, under decades of tax returns and birth certificates and old utility bills I cannot bring myself to throw away, was a folder I labeled in black marker a long time ago. Final. I carried it to the bed and opened it slowly. My will was in there. My life insurance policies, the deeds to the 3 rental properties, bank statements with balances that would genuinely surprise anyone who had watched me clip coupons my whole life. And right at the top of the beneficiary section was Thomas's name. I sat there looking at his name for a long time, long enough for the house to get cold, long enough for the streetlight outside to stop blinking and just go steady. Then I tore the will in half, then in quarters, kept going until the pieces were small enough that I could hold them all in one hand. I sat there with those pieces and breathed. The air in that room actually felt lighter after, like something that had been pressing down had finally lifted. Next morning, I called my friend Ruth. Now, for those of you who do not know who Ruth is, Ruth has been my best friend since we were both 19 years old. Singing in the choir at our church back when we were young enough to think our lives were going to be simpler than they turned out to be. We have held each other through things I do not even want to name out loud. Funerals, marriages that fell apart, children who disappointed us, diagnoses that changed everything. When she picked up the phone that morning, she already knew something had happened, just from the way I said her name. I told her all of it. What Thomas said about the aesthetic, what Amanda said about long-term care, the last thing he said at the door, all of it. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Dorothy, I saw the wedding announcement. Your name was not in it anywhere." I said, "I know. I need you to come over today. I need to rewrite the will." She said, "Are you absolutely sure about this?" And here is where I want to check in with you, because I have been asking myself this question for months. Was I sure? Am I still sure? Drop something in the comments, because I want to know if you think what I did was right, because I have gone back and forth on it, and I keep landing in the same place. But I want to hear from other people. I told Ruth I was sure. I said, "I may be dying, but I am not dead yet. And today, I am taking back what belongs to me." She was at my door by noon. Now here is where I want to talk to you directly for a minute, because I think this is important, and I do not want it to get lost in the story. I already know some of you are thinking, "Dorothy, that is bitterness. That is a hurt woman making a decision she is going to regret later." And I understand why it looks that way from the outside. I really do. But let me tell you what was actually going through my mind that morning. That money was mine. I built it on night shifts and coupons and decades of saying no to myself. And the law says I have the absolute right to decide where it goes. Always. The only thing that changed on that Tuesday was my understanding of who the right person was to receive it. Here is what I want every woman watching this to know. You have the right to change your will at any time, for any reason, and nobody can stop you. It does not matter if someone shares your blood. A good estate lawyer can make your wishes airtight so they cannot be challenged after you are gone. And if you have not updated your documents in years, please go do that. Please, because your life changes, and the people in it change. And your paperwork needs to reflect who you actually are right now, not who you were before certain people showed you certain things. I learned this lesson later than I should have. Ruth came in without knocking, because she has never knocked at my door in 50 years of friendship, and she is not about to start now. She set her briefcase on the dining table, sat down across from me, and we got to work without a lot of talking about it. Because sometimes the most loving thing a friend can do is just help you do the next thing. I gave her everything she needed: account numbers, property addresses, the name of my banker, the title to the salon I co-owned with Joyce. I even had $10,000 cash in an envelope in my sewing drawer that I had labeled, "In case the world ends," which got a look from Ruth, but no comment. And she listed every single asset without judgment. At the top of the new will, she wrote the name I had chosen: the Grace House Foundation. It is a women's shelter in Tennessee that takes in elderly women who have been abandoned by their families. Women who have been made to feel like a burden just for still being alive. Women who spend their days in rooms no one visits. I volunteered there years ago. I painted walls and served food and sat with women who were too tired to read on their own. And I remember thinking, I never want to be one of these women. And then I became one of these women. I signed the new will with a hand that was shaking, but eyes that were not. Ruth sealed everything and put it in her briefcase. Then she looked at me over the top of her reading glasses and said, "What do you want to do about the wedding?" I said, "I want to go." She raised one eyebrow, just one. That is a Ruth thing. I said, "Not to cause trouble, not to ruin their day. I just want to be in the room. I want to see my son get married with my own eyes. And when it is over, I want him to know what I decided." She nodded once and said, "I will handle the envelope." 4 days before the wedding, an envelope showed up in my mailbox, with gold lettering and embossed trim that I could feel with my fingers before I even opened it. It was not from Thomas. It was from my cousin Patricia. And if you have a Patricia in your family, you already know what I am talking about. She is always at every family event, with a plate of something and a pocket full of everybody else's business. Inside was a card with calligraphy and a glossy photo of Thomas and Amanda standing under a white archway, with smiles so polished I kept looking for the seam. At the bottom of the card, in smaller font, was a handwritten note from Patricia that said, "We would love for you to join us, quietly of course. Please sit in the designated family section and respect the couple's wishes." Quietly, of course. I read that twice, set the card on my counter, and knew immediately that I was going. Not for them, for myself. Because I had shown up for that boy every single day of his life, and I was not about to let the last image he had of me be a woman who stayed home. Morning of the wedding, I got up before the sun. I bathed slowly, put on my soft gray Easter suit, the one that still fits right and makes me feel like myself. Wrapped my head in my good blue scarf with the silver threading that I have had for years, pinned on the brooch my mother gave me when I finished school, a small silver dove, worn smooth in places, but still holding its shape, And I thought about her when I pinned it on, and I thought she would understand what I was about to do. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. My body looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile, the kind of fragile that sneaks up on you when you are not paying attention. But my eyes were still exactly mine. Ruth arrived on time, in her navy pantsuit, briefcase in hand, already in business mode. She had the manila envelope, sealed, with Thomas's name on the outside. I handed her a second smaller one. I said, "That one is for Amanda. Give it to her after." She said, "Dorothy, are you physically strong enough for this today?" I said, "Ruth, I just need to see it one time with my own eyes. That is all I am asking for." The vineyard was something, I am not going to lie. Green rows stretching up into the hills, white tents everywhere, string lights already on, even though it was still morning. A little string quartet playing near the entrance. Guests floating around in pastels, like they had all agreed beforehand on exactly how elegant they were going to be. I sat in the car for a minute before getting out. He really did spare no expense, I thought. And then I thought, with what? Because the money I had been quietly building for 30 years was going to a women's shelter in Tennessee now. So whatever he spent, it was not my money. I just want to be clear about that. We walked to the designated family section. A few people nodded politely as we passed, and nobody recognized me, which was exactly what I had been told to aim for. The invisible woman in the third row. I sat down quietly, just like the card said. The ceremony started, and Thomas came down the aisle looking sharp and proud and handsome in the way that still catches me sometimes. That is still my son up there, and I had to take a breath. I am going to be honest with you. I had to really take a breath, because Amanda came down after him, and she was beautiful. The crowd sighed. And I understood in that moment why he chose her. I am not so far gone that I cannot see that, but understanding it did not make any of the rest of it okay. The officiant talked about unity and trust and honoring the people who shaped you. Thomas shifted when that part came. He did not look back. But he shifted, I noticed. The vows were long. Amanda cried during hers, and the whole crowd went, "Aw." And I am sitting there in the third row, like a guest at someone else's wedding, trying to hold my face together. Thomas smiled that charm he has had since he was 12. They exchanged rings. They kissed. Everyone stood and applauded. I stayed in my seat, not out of spite. I just genuinely did not have the energy to stand. And I was not going to perform something I was not feeling for the benefit of people who did not know who I was. Ruth leaned over and said quietly, "You want me to go now?" I said, "Let them have the moment." I meant it. When the guests started moving toward the reception tent, and Thomas and Amanda were over by the floral arch, taking photos and laughing and pulling each other close, I turned to Ruth and gave her one nod. She stood up and walked toward them. And I want you to picture Ruth doing this, because it is the most Ruth thing that has ever happened. She moved without rushing, without drama, without any kind of announcement. Just a woman on a mission who has been doing difficult things with grace for 50 years and knows exactly how to move through a room. Amanda saw her coming first and got a confused look. Thomas turned around, and his smile went still. Ruth said, "Congratulations. This is from your mother." She handed Thomas his envelope, handed Amanda the smaller one, turned around and walked straight back to me, without another word. And y'all, I watched him open that envelope from across the vineyard. I could see the exact moment his face changed. Confusion first, then something that looked like the ground shifting under him. And I thought, okay, he is reading it now. He is seeing it now. He looked up. Our eyes met across all that curated elegance, and I did not look away. I let him see me, sitting there, in my scarf, in my suit, in the third row. The woman he told to stay home because she would ruin the photos. I let him see me, and I let him read what I had written. The letter said this: "Thomas, by the time you read this, you will have just married Amanda, and I am happy you found someone. But I need you to know something. The envelope Ruth handed you contains a copy of my updated will. Everything I built, the 3 rental properties, the salon, the savings accounts, the life insurance, all of it. It is going to the Grace House Foundation, a women's shelter for elderly women abandoned by their families. You will receive nothing. Not because I do not love you. I do. I always will. But because you made it clear that I am a burden to you, an embarrassment, something to be managed and hidden away. And I refuse to spend the rest of my life funding someone who thinks I am too ugly to be seen. I worked night shifts for 28 years to build this, and I decide where it goes. I hope you have a beautiful life, Thomas. I really do. But it will not be funded by me. Your mother, Dorothy. Amanda's letter was shorter. Amanda, long-term care is expensive. I hope you have been saving. Dorothy. I sat there and watched Thomas read that letter twice. And then I watched Amanda read hers. And then I watched him try to walk toward me. And Ruth stepped in front of him. She did not say a word, just stood there, between him and me. And I stood up, slowly, with all the dignity I could gather, and I walked out of that vineyard, with my head up and my scarf in place, and my mother's brooch pinned to my chest, and I did not look back. I am 83 years old. I may not have much time left, but I will not spend it begging my own son to see me as human. I took back what was mine, and I gave it to women who needed it more than he did. And I do not regret it, not for 1 second. Some people will say I was cruel, that I should have forgiven him, that blood is blood. But I say this: respect is earned, and cruelty has consequences, even when it comes from your own child. I am Dorothy. I am 83 years old, and I am finally free.